Hi, everyone. Welcome back to On the Sports Clock. Excited for my next guest, my close mentor, good friend, former Chicago Cubs general manager, also played for the Mets and Cubs, including the 86 World Series team for the Mets, Ed Lynch. Ed, how are things down in Arizona?
Everything's good. Nice and hot here. So like it is everywhere, but everything's good. Thanks, Tyler.
Good. Appreciate you being on, obviously. And want to talk, obviously, some big news this morning coming out of New York. Jesse Winker traded to the Mets from the Nationals. What do you think of that trade?
I think it's an excellent trade for the Mets. You know, here's a high on-base percentage guy who knows the strike zone. He will take a walk. He's not a over-swinger, free swinger kind of guy, which, you know, there seems to be an overabundance in those guys up and down everybody's lineup. Now, I think it's okay to have those guys in the heart of your lineup, 4, 5, 6. That's fine. You know, swing on an upward plane. You know, they call it launch angle. We used to call it an uppercut. You know, if you make solid contact, you're going to hit the ball high in the air and probably hit a home run nowadays with the way the bats and the balls are. But you're really going to have a lot of swing and misses if you're swinging at an upward angle. Now, my point is that those guys are okay. I don't really care if if I'm Aaron Boone, I don't care if Aaron Judge has an uppercut in his swing. I don't care if he strikes out 180 times. I don't, because the times he does make contact, like he did last night, that ball's going to be out across the street somewhere, and he's going to drive in a lot of runs for you. But when you have guys in the leadoff spot with the same approach, or in the 8, 7, 8, 9 hole, the same approach, then now you've got tons of strikeouts. You don't have a lot of walks, and you don't have many guys on base. So when those guys that come up with that uppercut, the guys that you want to try to hit the ball out of the park, you're getting an awful lot of solo home runs, and we're seeing a lot of that too. So I think this addition of Jesse Winker in the middle of their lineup is outstanding. I mean, here's a guy, he's hitting around the league average. He's hitting 257, which is probably it's above the league average, actually. 10 or 12 points. I haven't looked at in the last week or so. But here's a guy with a above average batting average, and he's got a 374 on base percentage. I talked to his former manager, Jim Riggleman, this morning, who was my manager in Chicago for a while. And Jim is a great evaluator of players. And when you're that close to a player for that long, he was with him in Cincinnati for more than a year. So you're around this person every day, 7 days a week for basically 8 months in a year. So, you get to know these players better than anybody. And he said Jesse is when he had him, he was an outstanding makeup guy, just a free spirit, happy-go-lucky, play hard kind of guy. Now, there was a couple of bumps in his road later on when he went to some of these other clubs and didn't perform maybe as he hoped. And, and the word around the league was that, he might be a little bit of a malcontent. But, the thing that, a lot of people don't realize is that these players are human beings. And, he went to Seattle, I think, and maybe Milwaukee. He's making money. He wasn't performing as well. That takes a toll on you, and it can change your personality. But deep down inside, this guy is a gamer. He knows the strike zone. He uses the whole field, which is incredibly important nowadays, to take away a lot of I know shifts are illegal, but, man, you see that with left-handed hitters up. You see that shortstop playing almost behind second base on majority of left-handed hitters that I see. So if he can hit a hard ground ball to the left side of the infield or hit a line drive in the gap in left center field, that spreads the defense out and it makes it a lot easier for him and for you to score runs. So I think that was an outstanding addition on the offensive side of the ball for the New York Mets.
Yeah, when I woke up this morning getting ready for my day, whatever, and I saw that, I was ecstatic. I don't think I've been this excited about a trade, Ed, since I was working for the Cubs in 2016 when they got Aroldis Chapman. Like, that's how excited I am. And I was a Cubs fan growing up, Mets fan now too, but great addition. They're in the playoff hunt, got that third spot in the wild card right there. So going to be an interesting ride, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. Hey, there's a lot of baseball left. I remember our pennant race for the wild card in 1998. It was us, the Giants, and the Mets, and we never got more than a game and a half between any of the three of us. for the last 2 months of the season. And let me tell you something, you talk about pressure. Every day, there was no in between. There's no like, hey, we lost today, but boy, we played well. No, there's none of that. You'd rather play horrible and look like crap and win the game than look really good and have a tough loss. So everything is win or lose. There's no in between. You can't afford to lose 5 in a row, but you can win 5 in a row and really get back into this race. This third wild card, I thought, was an outstanding addition to ramp up the interest in baseball. But one thing I have to say about the Mets, the offensive side of the ball is not their problem. I mean, they're 6th in runs scored. If you want to look at an offense, go right to runs scored. That's the category that means the most. It almost tells the whole entire tale about a team's offense is runs scored. Now, there's subsections within that section, and those are, late and close, extra inning runs on the road, things like that. But, I mean, you get a good feel for a team's offense when you look at how many runs do they score. You can lead the league in home runs and finish in last if you don't score runs. If you hit a bunch of solo home runs and you give up a bunch of runs, it doesn't matter. But, they're 6th in runs scored. They're 10th in on-base percentage. That could be better. Now, this is all 30 teams now, and you almost have to look at that at 30 teams. In the old days, we just look at the National League. I don't care what's going on in the American League. How are we within our league? We just have to get out of our league. But everybody plays everybody now, so you're going to be evaluated on every team in baseball. So they're 10th in on-base percentage. They're 8th in OPS, which is very good. Now, they're 5th in home runs. Home runs are nice. They're important, but they're not the be-all, tell-all. Right. But on the other side of the ball, pitching, they're 21st in ERA. They're 22nd in WHIP, which tells you how many guys are getting on base every inning. They're 9th in opponent's batting average, which is not bad. That's okay. But the flip side of that is they are 29th in walks, giving up the most walks. So while this Jesse Winker trade, I thought, they did a great job in this trade. They did their homework. I'm not that familiar with the Double-A pitcher they gave up. But on the offensive side of the ball, this gives them, I think, a better lineup. I assume they're going to move McNeil back to second base. McNeil is a hell of an athlete. He's a hell of a baseball player. Not many guys, the old saying is the closer you get to home plate as a defender, the tougher it gets. You take a guy out of left field and put him at third base, that's pretty nerve-wracking. So, but he's played there so much before. He's a good athlete. He's a tough competitor. He's a baseball guy. So they move him to second base, and now they got Winker in right field. They get an additional left-handed bat in the lineup. So, this makes them a better lineup. This makes them a better offensive team. But I'm still concerned a little bit about their pitching.
Yeah, and I appreciate all that information and insight, and coming from a former coach, I'm sure you're going to do a show later. And for all my listeners, please give Surfing Baseball with Ed Lynch a follow. Follow us on social media. We're on X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, X formerly known as Twitter. Great content, great stuff. Ed's just a great speaker, got a lot of insight, obviously being a former GM. So definitely go give us a follow over there. We've had Pete Rose on. We've had Ron Darling. Got some pretty cool guests coming up. Not going to announce them now, but got a lot of great content. Obviously, want to give a shout out to Bob Nightingale, who's Ed's partner in this as well. He's great insights. So Surfing Baseball with Ed Lynch. And Ed, kind of talking about the current game, but going back, this is the last week coming up on the trade deadline. You were a GM in Chicago. Can you kind of just give our listeners some insight on trades, how they went down back in the day, and from a GM's perspective, because we don't really hear that a lot?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a very stressful time for everybody, and everybody in the media wants you to declare whether you're a buyer or a seller, Right. And if you come out and you're just not going to use those words, not with a third wild card. Now, some people get a little bit of delusional when it comes to the wild card now. Hey, we're only 5.5 out of the third wild card, but you got 4 or 5 teams ahead of you, and you're not going to be playing those teams. And that's the problem. The problem with having a schedule like we have where everybody plays everybody, you might not be playing those teams that are ahead of you in the National League in the wild card race. You might not even see those people the last 3 weeks of the season. I mean, you might, if you're the New York Mets, I haven't looked at the schedule, but I know darn well there's going to be a situation where there's a National League team who was in the wild card race, and that might be playing the Kansas City Royals the last week of the season, trying to catch, the New York Mets, or trying to catch the Atlanta Braves in the wild card. Before interleague play, boy, I'll tell you what, back in the day, when they started the wild card, I mean, you're going to see that everybody in your division the last month of the season, and you're going to have a chance to catch those teams. And then the other games in the National League only, you're going to be playing the other wild card contenders. So it's a little more difficult now to move up slots in that wild card. So my point is that when everybody wants you to declare whether you're a buyer or a seller, the easiest thing to do is not easiest without lying is, hey, there's 3 wild cards. We're only 4 games back in the 3rd wild card. If a deal comes along that's going to help our club long-term, significantly long-term, we're going to consider that. We're realistic about our chances, but we still are going after that 3rd wild card or 2nd wild card or a division lead. We're going to go full steam ahead. Now, if you're like in a city like New York, if you're the Yankees and you're the Mets, boy, you better not be using that S word too much, because you've got the biggest media presence in the world. And you come out and say we're sellers, that means you're pulling the plug on your season. That's the way it is taken. Whether that's true or not, because is debatable. But if you come out and say you're a seller, or you go trade one of your better relievers, boy, the media is going to be down in that clubhouse asking players what they think. And hey, the players are competitive people. They're not paid to be front office people. They're paid to win today and tomorrow and the next day. And if you trade one of the better relievers out in your bullpen, you're not going to get a lot of positive feedback from your players on that. So there's a lot of pressure involved as a general manager. And, with the 3rd wild card now, almost everybody is in the race. You've got 3, 6, 12 teams are going to make the playoffs. So that's almost half of, both leagues. So, there's a lot of pressure. You try to make the best deal you can. And, there's been some rule changes too. There's no post-waiver, post-trading deadline trades. In the old days, if you're the New York Mets and you've got, financial resources, there might be a team who's got to put a guy on waivers after the deadline just to see who claims him. In the old days, you put a guy on waivers. If somebody claims him, you have 72 hours to either take him back, let him go, or work out a deal,
Right.
And so in the past, you had a team with financial wherewithal. They could look at that waiver wire and say, hey, here's a really good player with an absolutely horrible contract. But we'll take that player because we have the resources to overpay a good player who's being paid like a perennial all-star. We have the financial resources to take that contract. But now those trades are done. So you better get it done by the 30th, or you're probably not going to get it done at all. So the next 2 days are going to tell a real important story.
Yeah, and I think back to like when you were GM of the Cubs. So 2 questions here. First, if a guy are some trades, I'm just curious, are some trades where a player is like, hey, listen, I'm not fitting in well in this city, I'm having a hard time adjusting, I'm homesick, whatever the case may be. Are some trades initiated by the player where it's like, please trade me, I have to get out of this situation? Have you seen that? The other question too, I was talking to a GM a while back, and this former GM mentioned that sometimes they will leak, GMs themselves will leak potential trades to the media just to see what the feedback will be. And they will decide at that point, hey, the feedback's negative, we better not go through with this, or the feedback's great from the public, the media, we better go through with this as well. So kind of your take, if you don't mind, on those 2 aspects.
No, Well, I don't, if a player, I think this only happened once to me where an agent called up and demanded I trade his player.
Mm-hmm.
And my stock answer has always been, you show me in the basic agreement where he has the right to demand a trade, then I'll accommodate your player. Otherwise, I'm going to do what's best for this organization. He better put on his big boy pants. If he's not happy, that's tough, Put on your big boy pants, go out there and compete. My job is to get do the best what's for the organization, not for the individual player. And the other thing, I would never leak a potential trade. I know people do it. See, I was a player. And, these players have families, they have friends. They got a lot of people depending on them. Some of them might not be, stable enough or understand the business enough to realize that, hey, anybody can be traded, So when you start leaking things, well, the Mets might do this. And I know that they're not going to do. David Stern would not do this. He's a very competent professional. So I can't see me doing that. Has it been done before? Absolutely. It's been done. And then people gauge the reaction and then they go, oh, no, we'd never do that. They leak something and then say they never do that. But no, I think that's a very unprofessional and insensitive way to gauge, whether or not this trade is good for your club or how it's going to be received. And, one thing I learned is you find solace in your own mind. If you have to make a very, very difficult decision in life, whatever industry you're in, whatever you're doing in life, if you have to make a very, very difficult decision, you research that to the point where there's nothing anybody can ask you that you can't answer, or there's no scenario surrounding that decision you've made that you can't come back with, well, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? It's my job to do this or that. You research these decisions to the point where nobody knows all the factors involved in that decision better than you. And so when you get that tough question at the press conference, then you come up with the reason why. Now, they might not like it. You might be 15 games out of the third wild card and you trade a very popular player and get young prospects back and they're ripping you for that. Well, you can say, hey, listen, we're 15 games out of the third wild card. I know, John Jones is a very popular player, has been here a long time, but my job is to make this club better. And I think what this trade makes us better. This year might be not the time to get better, but, it's going to help us down the line. So, you have an answer for every tough decision you make.
Yeah, and I was talking to my former college coach, Keith Gooden, who just retired there at Missouri State. And I mentioned, he mentioned, that he said some of the best GMs, best players, he's dealt with them 42 years, over 2,000 games coached at the college level. And he said the best player or the best GMs, front office, whatever, were guys who put on a uniform. So coming from you as someone who put on that uniform, can definitely appreciate that. And I want to go back to 86 too. Obviously there's the World Series, the 30 for 30 that's gone on about the 86 Mets. But did you know back then, Ed, that you would be a general manager? And I know in 86 you were traded. Did that kind of scenario of you being traded to Chicago put it in perspective of how you would trade, or deal with trades later when you were GM, or can you kind of talk about that process?
Well, being a player for all the years I was a player and being in that clubhouse, you realize one thing, that, players are human beings. They have feelings, Some of our feelings are irrational. Some of them are very rational. I was very rational when I got traded. I hurt my knee in spring training. I threw, I think, 2 1/3 innings in one outing at Philadelphia earlier in the year. My knee was the size of a basketball, and I went in for surgery, and now I'm rehabbing my knee, and the Mets are like running away with the division in May. I mean, in May and June, early June, we're up like 15 games in June. And I'm now I get sent down to AAA on a rehab assignment, go down for I think it was 2 weeks in those days. I'm not sure. I remember. And I'm pitching in Norfolk. And I know when my rehab assignment is up, one of two things is going to happen. I'm going to be on the Mets 25-man roster, or I'm not going to be on the Mets 25-man roster. And in those days, the Mets were so good that I'm looking at their pitching staff. And let's face it, baseball's a business. The last pitcher on that staff was Rick Aguilera, a future all-star. And he's making the minimum, which at that time was probably $40,000. And I had just won an arbitration case that winter before against the Mets, and now I'm making $530,000. Number one, Rick Aguilera was a better pitcher than me at that time in terms of his stuff and his potential. And number two, I was making 10, 15 times more than he was. So I knew when the days were getting close, I knew I was not going back to New York. I knew it. And then I remember the second to last day of my rehab assignment, my father-in-law calls me and goes, "Hey, have you seen the New York Times today?" I said, "No." And I was staying at a hotel in Norfolk. I ran downstairs. I got the paper. I opened it up, and it said, "Lynch trade expected today." That's the first I heard of it. And it was almost like a movie. I'm sitting there reading it, and all of a sudden the phone rings. No cell phones. So I'm in my hotel room. My phone rings in the room, and I'm reading this article, and the phone rings. It's like, oh, my God, this is like a movie. And I picked up the phone. It was Al Harrison, who was like one of the assistant GMs of the Mets. And he said, "Ed, we made a trade, and you're going to the Chicago Cubs." And I said, "Thanks very much, Al. Good luck." And I hung up the phone. Did I feel disappointed? Yes. Was I angry? A little bit. And then the phone rang again. It was Dallas Green of the Cubs saying, "Hey, Ed, we're glad to have you." I just went from the best team in baseball to a team that was in last place in the same division we were in. But I knew deep down inside that it's part of the game. Now, if I had thrown my hands up in the air, the Mets are a terrible organization, how can they do that to me? Number one, I'd look stupid. And number two, I'm telling the world I'm so naive that I didn't think anything like that could ever happen to me. And the third thing is my phone rang for the next 2 days from every writer trying to get me to say something negative about the New York Mets. And I said, "Hey, guys, what the heck am I going to say? I'm a nobody. They're running away with the division. I'm going to criticize the Mets for trading Ed Lynch. Are you kidding me?" So I took the high road, which is always good. The old saying, don't burn any bridges. Well, I didn't. And, I think because of that, I got a call from Frank Cashin right after the World Series saying, "Ed, we've awarded you a world championship ring." Now, if I had ripped them and told them, they're the dumbest people in the world for trading a guy like me, number one, I would have been laughed out of town. And number two, would have pissed off the GM. So I think it's always best to take the high road, especially on things you can't control. There's nothing I'm going to say is going to change that decision. So why say anything at all? Be positive. Take the high road. Yahoo, Plus, my new teammates in Chicago, if I start saying, "Oh, my God, I'm going to the worst team in the division," how are they going to feel when I walk in the door, So I took the high road. I was mature enough. I was 30 years old. I was engaged to be married. I was a man. Now, if it happens, nowadays, I guarantee in the next few days, there's going to be a 19-year-old kid in AA or a young big leaguer who gets traded, and they're going to be like, "Oh, they don't want me anymore." And what I would tell them is, this is the best thing that's ever happened to you for a lot of reasons. Number one, you're going somewhere where somebody wants you. They've identified you as somebody they want. They believe in you. Most cases, sometimes, like in this case, getting Jesse Winker, that might have been, "Hey, we'll take the salary, but we're not going to give you anybody that's any good." I'm not saying that's the case, but a lot of times you take a big salary and a team is looking to save face because their fans don't want to feel like, "Hey, they're just getting rid of guys who are making money." You might send a guy who has really good numbers in AA, but deep down inside, and they know deep down inside, the guy's not a prospect. So right. You help them save face. But, the bottom line is I tell that player, "Hey, you're going somewhere," if it's a legitimate trade involving high-profile players and high-profile prospects, you tell that prospect, "Hey, you're going there. Number one, they want you. Hey, and number two, from a selfish standpoint, that guy wants that trade to look good. So he's going to push you. He's going to make sure you get to the big leagues. And when you get to the big leagues, you say, 'Hey, look, I got a big league player for that guy we traded, and I took so much crap about, So, being traded, in my opinion, most of the time is a very, very positive thing.
And yeah, that's a great perspective you bring. And I think about going to Springfield Cardinals games growing up, and I'd be sitting behind home plate. And when I was growing up, Albert Pujols was the first baseman of the Cardinals. He wasn't going anywhere. And so I saw all these first basemen coming through Springfield, and I'm like, what are they thinking? Like, unless Pujols gets hurt, or, like, how do they feel basically being blocked? And then it's kind of what you brought up, like, hey, they're more playing to, some first basemen are also catchers, but for the most part, it was one of those things where it's like, hey, they're kind of maybe anticipating being traded at some point.
Well, the old saying is you're not playing just for your own club, you're playing for the other 29. That's why you have to realize every time you step on that field, you look up in the stands. Well, now they don't have many scouts now, but everybody's on video. I mean, everybody, which I don't think is enough to scout a player, because you can't see how he comes out for batting practice and stretching. As a scout, you're sitting there and watch this guy. And what you're looking for is a guy with enthusiasm. Is he a high energy guy? Is he the last guy to come on the field? Is he the first guy on the field? I mean, you're not looking for choir boys, cheerleader kind of guys, but you can find out a lot about a player in terms of his pregame work. And I hear they're even filming that. But, I mean, you can't sit in Chicago and have a camera in Des Moines and you're evaluating your players by you can't do it. It just doesn't work. Now, you might look at the mechanics of his swing and what he does in the game, but, everybody's got the same numbers, right? Everybody's got the same numbers. So to differentiate from what people have number-wise, you've got to makeup is so important. And, is a guy on the field, the first guy on the field, does he run on and off the field? When he strikes out, is he hanging his head? Is he throwing his bat in the dugout? Nobody wants to see that crap as a player, trust me. I mean, what's the guy's attitude? Because baseball is a brutal, brutal sport. Now, they talk about the NFL. Obviously, NFL's most traumatic sport. You got people that, by the time they're 40 years old, they've got dementia. They can't walk. They're in wheelchairs. But baseball is an incredibly taxing game because you play it every day.
Yeah.
You're out there 6-7 days a week. You're in the heat. You're going to have times when you struggle. So, I mean, it's important you have people there watching to see, how does this guy act when he's 1 for 21 and it's 110 degrees and he's facing the best pitcher in the league? How does he react to that? I mean, everybody can be a wonderful person when they're hitting 370 and they're hot and giving high five to fans and all that crap. But, you've got to understand that these are people, and it's important that you have somebody judging them or scouting them. They say, don't judge, lest you be judged. Well, that was your job as a scout. You judge people. It's not morally correct, maybe, but that's your job. So you have to be able to have people on the ground to see what those guys are like as people. Now, I'll talk about the 86 Mets a little bit. I ran down these 6th in the league in this, 10th in the league in that. Man, we were 1 and 2 in everything. 1 or 2 in everything. First in the league in offense, dominating in pitching, dominating. So, you look at a team like that and you say, man, this team's got a legitimate chance to win the World Series, and that's how good that team was. When you have a lineup like that and you've got pitching like that, I mean, the pitching was so dominant. And there was none of that, and I feel bad for Dwight Gooden because, I look at Paul Skeens now, 6 innings, come out with a 2-1 lead, come out losing 1-0, whatever. He just got his first loss the other day, went into the 9th inning, 8 1/3. And it was like a reaction, like, wow, he went into the 9th inning. I don't know how many complete games Dwight pitched, but by the time that Dwight Gooden was 22 years old, he had thrown over 700 innings.
Wow.
700, okay?
Wow.
I mean, he probably 230. I'd have to look. 230 as a 19-year-old, 240 as a 20-year-old, probably 210 as a 21-year-old. By his 22nd birthday, he might have had 900 innings because Dwight's birthday's in November. Skeens just had his birthday. So, I mean, times were different. But when you have pitchers, when you're coming into New York, I remember talking to hitters that later on, they're coming into New York in the Shea Stadium for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They got Dwight Gooden on Friday night. They got Ron Darling on Saturday night. And they got Sid Fernandez on Sunday afternoon or Bobby Ojeda. I mean, you're looking at a 1 for 15 right in the face every time you come into New York for a 3-game series, right? So that team was so dominant. And then if the starter didn't go 9 innings, now you got Jesse Orosco and Roger McDowell to finish it out. So, I mean, that team was so far off the charts compared to, this Met team. I'm not trying to insult them, but let's face the facts. But I don't think we made a trade at the deadline in 86. I really don't. They made a great trade in the offseason. The reason the Mets won the World Series, I can say this with a straight face. The reason the Mets won the World Series in 86, there's a long list, but one guy near the top of that list was Bobby Ojeda. Mm-hmm. They traded Bobby Ojeda for Calvin Schiraldi and the other right-handed reliever, I forget his name. And Bobby came in as a left-hander, won 18 games in that rotation. So, my point is that team was so good that you really didn't have to tweak anything.
Yeah, and I think about two things in terms of scouting. I agree with you 100%. I'd have, when I was video coordinator for Missouri State, I'd have got, we had John Harris, first rounder with the Blue Jays, Jake Berger, who plays for Miami now. He was a freshman. Tate Matheny, Mike Matheny's son. Those were all guys, who were on the team. And scouts would come up to me because they were trying to find out, hey, what's this guy, like in the locker room? What's he, they would ask me, like, what's Tate Matheny's character? And I would always tell them, Tate Matheny treats everybody the same way. He treats, like, he doesn't walk around like my dad's the manager of the Cardinals,
Yeah. So it's all about getting information, Yeah. It's all about finding out from people who are unbiased,
right?
I mean, when I used to ask, when I was scouting and I would go into a city, I did a lot of scouting for USA Baseball too, because I put together all their teams, the Olympic team, the Pan American Games, the World Cup, and all those qualifying tournaments that go with that. And I had to find out information about a lot of players, So I would go into a dugout. Say I'm scouting somebody like Joe Jones again. Okay, he's playing in the Southern League. Now I come in and he's playing for Chattanooga. All right, so I come in to a game in Springfield, Missouri, and it's Springfield against Jacksonville. Oh, that's the Texas League. Never mind. Yeah. So I'm Jacksonville and Birmingham are playing. So I would go down the dugout and ask the Jacksonville manager about a kid that's playing for, another team for Chattanooga, So he doesn't feel threatened by that. Now, if I come in as a scout, hey, Ed Lynch, I'm working with USA Baseball, but I'm scouting for Toronto or Chicago. What about this guy on your team? Boy, they get real nervous, They don't want to talk about it. And I know that. So I would never ask them about. I might say, hey, good kid, huh? And let them talk. But I'm not going to ask specifics. But boy, they'll talk about guys on the other team. They'll talk about, I'll say, hey, I'm with Team USA, and we're hoping this guy can help us win the gold medal in the Pan Am Games. Boy, they'll talk all day about guys on the other team because they want to impress you that they know what they're looking at, and they want to help the United States of America. So, but that's what I'm talking about, an unbiased guy, So, and another great source of information for me, I go in and talk to the radio guys, They're dying to talk to somebody. And a lot of the guys know who I was because I pitched in the big leagues and I was a GM. So if I went into Springfield, Missouri, and I see the radio guy for the Springfield Cardinals, introduce myself. Oh, I know who you are, Ed. Yeah, I'm a Met fan, blah, blah, blah. Hey, what about your right fielder, John Jay? Is he a good guy? Is he play hard? And oh, he's a terrible guy. I'm not talking about John Jay, but they might say something like, oh, this guy's such an ass. Well, why is that? Please, I asked him to be on my show, and he's never on the show. I say, well, does he play hard? Oh, man, this guy plays hard. I mean, he's a gamer. He's, he plays to win, but I don't like him at all. He's a bad guy. He won't come on my show. So, you take that and say, that's a positive review for me, Right. So, I mean, information is out there that you can't get from a video camera sitting 1,000 miles away.
Hey, Ed, thanks so much for your time. As usual, appreciate everything. Always appreciate you every time I call and we just talk baseball. It's awesome. You've been a great mentor, friend, and look forward to continuing surfing baseball with Ed Lynch. Again, everybody check us out. And I'm going to post this on Surfing Baseball, so definitely check us out and feel free to reach out to me directly. And if you have any questions, and we might bring them up on the show sometime. So again, Surfing Baseball with Ed Lynch. Ed, thanks again. Always enjoy talking to you.
Thanks so much, Tyler. And, let's see what happens. Not much has happened, but I think things might start popping a little bit here now with the deadline tomorrow. So let's keep an eye on that, and we'll be back talking about some of these trades that may come up.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Ed Lynch, former Cubs GM, Mets and Cubs player, Surfing Baseball with Ed Lynch, and On the Sports Clock.